She had stopped believing in signs from God the day her company went public, and she realized she had everything except someone to share it with. Now, sitting alone at a table meant for two in one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, Victoria Chen wondered if this emptiness was simply the price of her choices. The city lights sparkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows like 1,000 unreachable stars, and her untouched salmon gazed back at her with something that felt uncomfortably like pity. 40 minutes had passed since her reservation time. Her blind date, arranged by her well-meaning assistant who insisted successful women needed love too, had clearly decided a billionaire CEO wasn't worth his Wednesday evening. Victoria took a slow sip of water, her engagement ring finger conspicuously bare after 38 years of life, and told herself this didn't hurt. She had weathered hostile takeovers and boardroom betrayals. She could certainly survive being stood up. Your blind date didn't show up either. The voice came from her left, barely above a whisper, tinged with exhaustion and something else she couldn't quite name. She turned to find a man sitting alone at the adjacent table, his navy suit crisp despite the weariness in his eyes. Dark hair slightly disheveled, a 5 o'clock shadow suggesting long days, and a gentle sadness that made her throat tighten unexpectedly. His own meal sat largely untouched before him. Victoria managed a rueful smile. That obvious? You've checked your phone exactly 17 times in the past 20 minutes, he said, and there was no judgment in his tone, only recognition. And you keep glancing at the entrance like you're expecting someone who deep down you know isn't coming. I'd recognize that look anywhere. I've been wearing it myself for the past hour. Something about his honesty disarmed her completely. In her world of calculated conversations and strategic networking, genuine vulnerability was rarer than venture capital in a recession. I'm sorry, she said softly. That's horrible. He shrugged, but she could see the disappointment he was trying to hide. My sister set it up. She means well. Keeps saying my daughter needs a mother figure, that I need to move on, that life doesn't wait for us to feel ready. He paused, running a hand through his hair. She's probably right, but that doesn't make evenings like this any easier. You're a single dad, Victoria said, and it wasn't really a question. Ryan Mitchell, he offered, extending his hand across the small space between their tables. Father to Emma, age 7, who is currently having a much better evening than I am at her grandmother's house. Software engineer, terrible at dating, and apparently not worth showing up for. Victoria shook his hand, struck by the warmth of his grip. Victoria Chen, CEO of Chen Technologies, terrible at work-life balance and apparently in the same boat. She hesitated, then added, though I suspect your daughter would disagree with your assessment of your worth. Something shifted in Ryan's expression, pain and love intertwined in a way that made Victoria's chest ache. Emma's the best thing that ever happened to me, he said quietly. Her mother, my wife Sarah, passed away 3 years ago. Breast cancer, 29 years old and gone in 8 months. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. I keep thinking I should be ready to move forward, but every time I try, it feels like I'm betraying the life we were supposed to have together. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. I'm so sorry, Ryan. Faith is complicated after something like that, Ryan continued, staring at his untouched steak. I grew up going to church every Sunday, believed God had a plan, trusted that prayer mattered. Then I watched my wife waste away despite every prayer I whispered, every bargain I tried to make with God, every tear I shed on my knees beside her hospital bed. Emma was only 4. She needed her mother. I needed my wife. But God apparently had other plans. He looked up at Victoria, and the raw honesty in his eyes stole her breath. I still take Emma to Sunday school, still say grace at dinner, but I'd be lying if I said I understand why things happen the way they do. Victoria found herself speaking before she could stop herself. I built an empire, she said, her voice barely audible above the restaurant's ambient music. Took a small tech startup and turned it into a billion-dollar company. I work 16-hour days, fly around the country making deals, make decisions that affect thousands of employees and their families. I'm profiled in Forbes and Fortune. I've been called a visionary, a genius, a force of nature. She laughed bitterly. But I go home to an empty penthouse every night and wonder what the point of all this success is if there's no one to share it with. Your career chose you or you chose your career? Ryan asked gently. Both, neither, I don't know anymore. Victoria surprised herself by continuing. I grew up poor in San Francisco's Chinatown. My parents immigrated from Taiwan with nothing. They worked in restaurants, cleaned offices, did whatever it took to survive. My mother used to pray at this tiny church near our apartment, lighting candles and asking God to give her children better opportunities. She died when I was 16. Heart attack in the restaurant kitchen where she worked doubles. Victoria's hands trembled slightly. I promised myself I'd never be powerless like that, never be at the mercy of circumstances I couldn't control. So I studied, worked, fought my way to Stanford on scholarships and never stopped climbing. But somewhere along the way, you looked around and realized you'd climbed alone, Ryan said softly. Victoria nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. I dated in college, but relationships always took time away from building my career. Men were intimidated by my ambition or wanted me to be less than I was. After the company took off, everyone who showed interest seemed more interested in my money than in me. So I stopped trying. Told myself success was enough. She met Ryan's gaze. My assistant practically forced me to agree to this blind date, said I needed to at least try to let someone in. But he didn't show up, Ryan said. But he didn't show up, Victoria echoed. And honestly, I'm relieved. It means I can go back to telling myself that relationships aren't for people like me, that I'm meant to focus on my company, that being alone is just the price of being at the top. She paused. Except sitting here watching you sit there, both of us alone at tables meant for sharing, I'm not sure I believe that anymore. Ryan was quiet for a moment, studying her with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable but instead felt like being truly seen for the first time in years. You want to know what Emma asked me before I left tonight? He finally said. She asked if I was going to meet the lady who would become her new mommy, and when I tried to explain that's not how these things work, that I was just having dinner with someone, to see if we got along, she looked at me with these wise 7-year-old eyes and said, Daddy, Mommy told me before she went to heaven that God would send someone special when we were ready. Maybe it's tonight. Victoria felt tears slip down her cheeks. What did you tell her? I told her that Mommy was very smart and we should trust God's timing, even when we don't understand it. Ryan's own eyes were bright with unshed tears, but sitting here alone, getting stood up by someone who was supposed to be a chance at moving forward, I felt like God's timing was just another way of saying I'm meant to be alone. That I already had my great love story, and asking for another one is greedy. That's not greedy, Victoria said firmly. That's human. That's wanting what we're meant to have. Connection, partnership, love. Your wife wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life alone. Neither would your mother, Ryan countered gently. She prayed for your opportunities, but I doubt those prayers were just about career success. Parents want their children to be happy, to be whole, to have people they love beside them. Victoria wiped at her tears, not caring that her makeup was probably running. So here we are, two people who got stood up by blind dates we didn't really want to go on in the first place, crying in an expensive restaurant about loneliness and loss and faith that doesn't make sense anymore. Ryan laughed, the sound surprising them both. When you put it that way, we sound pretty pathetic. We sound human, Victoria corrected, and found herself laughing too. We sound like two people who are tired of pretending they have it all figured out. I definitely don't have it figured out, Ryan admitted. Most days I'm just trying to make sure Emma has a decent breakfast, gets to school on time, and knows she's loved. I fix bugs in code for a living and consider it a success when I remember to buy milk before we run out. I'm about as far from a billionaire CEO's league as it gets. Maybe that's exactly what I need, Victoria said quietly. Someone who sees me as just Victoria, not Victoria Chen of Chen Technologies. Someone who understands loss and struggle and trying to move forward when everything in you wants to stay frozen in the past. Ryan held her gaze for a long moment. "This is crazy," he said. "We've been talking for maybe 20 minutes. We don't know each other. Our lives couldn't be more different. I make billion-dollar decisions on less information than this," Victoria said, surprised by her own boldness. "And right now, sitting here talking to you feels more real than anything has felt in years." "Emma would say this is God's plan," Ryan said softly. "That we were both supposed to get stood up so we'd be here at the same time, at adjacent tables, both vulnerable enough to actually be honest with each other." "What do you say?" Victoria asked. Ryan stood up, his decision made. He picked up his plate and water glass. "I say our separate tables are pretty depressing, and there's no reason two people who got stood up can't share dinner together." He moved to her table, setting down his plate across from her. "I say maybe Emma's smarter than both of us, and maybe God's timing is less about grand romantic gestures and more about two broken people finding each other when they've both stopped pretending they're not broken." Victoria felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been locked away for far too long. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I negotiate multi-million-dollar deals, but I don't know how to just be with someone, how to let someone in." "I don't either," Ryan said, sitting down across from her. "I'm out of practice at being anything other than dad. I change diapers and help with homework and make dinosaur-shaped pancakes. I don't know how to be romantic or impressive anymore." "Tell me about Emma," Victoria said. "Tell me about dinosaur pancakes and what a 7-year-old thinks about the world." So Ryan did. He told her about Emma's obsession with butterflies, how she insisted on wearing her purple rain boots even on sunny days, how she'd recently started a campaign to save the planet by refusing to use plastic straws. He talked about bedtime stories and scraped knees and parent-teacher conferences where he felt completely out of his depth. His face transformed as he spoke, love evident in every word, and Victoria found herself falling a little bit in love with both the father and the daughter she'd never met. "She sounds incredible," Victoria said when he paused. "You're raising a remarkable little girl." "She's raising me," Ryan corrected, "teaching me how to keep going when I don't think I can, how to find joy in small things, how to believe in tomorrow even when yesterday was painful." He took a bite of his steak, now completely cold, and didn't seem to care. "What about you? What does a billionaire CEO do when she's not running empires?" Victoria had to think about that. "Honestly, I work. I go to the gym at 5 in the morning because it's the only time my calendar is free. I attend charity galas where I write large checks because it's expected, not because I'm particularly connected to the causes. I have a penthouse full of expensive art I barely notice, and a closet full of designer clothes I wear to project power rather than express myself." She met his eyes. "I'm incredibly successful and incredibly lonely, and I'm not sure which one is cause and which is effect anymore." "When's the last time you did something just for joy?" Ryan asked. "Something that had nothing to do with business or networking or building your brand?" Victoria opened her mouth to answer and found she couldn't. The silence stretched between them, damning in its completeness. "Okay," Ryan said decisively. "New plan. After we finish this dinner, you're coming with me." "Where?" Victoria asked, surprised. "It's a surprise, but I promise it has nothing to do with business deals or being a CEO. It's just being human." He grinned, and the expression took years off his face. "Do you trust me?" Victoria realized with some shock that she did. This stranger who'd been hurt and disappointed and stood up, who wore his struggles openly instead of hiding them behind a corporate facade, who spoke about his daughter with such unguarded love, she trusted him completely. "Yes," she said, "I trust you." They finished their meal talking about everything and nothing. Ryan told her about growing up in Michigan, about his Catholic school education and altar boy days, about how his faith had been tested but not broken by Sarah's death. Victoria shared memories of her mother's prayers and the small Chinese Christian church in San Francisco, where hymns were sung in Mandarin and English interchangeably. They discovered they'd both read the same obscure science fiction series, Both loved Thai food, and both had a complicated relationship with the concept of destiny. When Ryan paid his bill and Victoria tried to pay hers, he shook his head. "My treat tonight, you can buy next time." "Next time?" Victoria said, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. "If you want there to be a next time," Ryan said, suddenly uncertain, "I know I'm probably not what you're looking for. Single dad, middle-class engineer comes with a 7-year-old who will absolutely interrogate you about your butterfly knowledge and climate change opinions. That sounds perfect," Victoria said, and meant it. Ryan drove a practical sedan that had definitely seen better days, child's car seat visible in the back, and Victoria loved it. He took her to a place she'd never been despite living in Chicago for years, a small church in a neighborhood far from her penthouse tower. The building was old, modest, beautiful in its simplicity. Light spilled from the stained glass windows, and Victoria could hear music from inside. "Wednesday night praise service," Ryan explained. "I don't always make it because of Emma's schedule, but when I do, it reminds me that faith isn't about understanding everything. It's about showing up anyway." He looked at her nervously. "Too weird? We can go somewhere else." "No," Victoria said firmly. "This is perfect." They slipped into a back pew, and Victoria couldn't remember the last time she'd been in a church outside of weddings or funerals. The congregation was small, diverse, full of people who looked like they'd come straight from work or home, no airs or pretensions. An older woman was leading worship with an acoustic guitar, her voice clear and full of a hope that made Victoria's eyes sting. Ryan didn't sing. Victoria suspected the emotions were too close to the surface, but he closed his eyes and listened, and Victoria watched peace settle over his features. She found herself mouthing the words to songs she'd learned as a child in her mother's church, memories flooding back of candlelight and prayers whispered in multiple languages and a bone-deep certainty that she was loved. When had she lost that certainty? When had faith become something she'd left behind along with poverty and powerlessness? The pastor, a young woman in jeans and a sweater, spoke about divine appointments, about how sometimes God's plans look nothing like what we expected, but are exactly what we need. About how we can plan our ways, but God directs our steps. About how isolation is not God's design for humanity, that we were meant for connection, for community, for love. Victoria felt Ryan's hand find hers in the dim light of the church, his fingers warm and solid and real. She squeezed back, something huge and terrifying and wonderful opening up in her chest. After the service, Ryan drove them to a diner, the kind of place Victoria never went, with worn booths and a menu that had probably been unchanged since the 80s. They ordered coffee and pie, and Ryan told her more about Sarah, about their love story that started in college and ended far too soon. "I don't want to replace her," Victoria said carefully. "I don't want to be someone's consolation prize or second choice." "You wouldn't be," Ryan said immediately. "Sarah and I had our time and it was beautiful and I'll always love her. But love isn't finite. Emma taught me that." She loves Sarah, looks at pictures, talks to her, remembers her even though the memories are fading. But she also has room in her heart for more love. New love, different love. If I've learned anything from losing Sarah, it's that life is short and uncertain, and when you find someone who makes you feel less alone, you don't walk away from that because you're afraid, or because it wasn't what you planned. "I'm terrified," Victoria admitted. "I've built my entire life around control and predictability and success I can measure. This, us, it's none of those things." "Best things rarely are," Ryan said. "Emma wasn't planned. Sarah and I were just out of college, broke, living in a tiny apartment, definitely not ready for a baby. But she was the best surprise of our lives." His voice caught. "Sometimes the things that scare us most are the things we need most." Victoria thought about her empty penthouse, her packed calendar, her impressive accomplishments that felt increasingly hollow. She thought about Ryan's daughter who believed in God's timing and butterfly conservation. She thought about her mother lighting candles in a small church and praying for better opportunities for her children. "I want to meet Emma," she said. Ryan's face lit up. "Yeah? Yeah. I want to learn about dinosaur pancakes and purple rain boots and why plastic straws are destroying the planet. I want to see if a 7-year-old can teach a billionaire CEO about what actually matters. Victoria paused. And I want to see if maybe this thing between us, this crazy, unexpected, impossible thing, might actually be real. It's real, Ryan said softly. I know it's fast and probably insane, but sitting here with you feels more right than anything has felt since Sarah died. Like maybe I'm allowed to have a second chance at happiness. Like maybe God's timing really does work out, even when the path there is nothing like what we expected. They talked until the diner was preparing to close, until the coffee was cold and the pie long finished. They exchanged numbers and made plans for Saturday. Ryan would bring Emma to a park somewhere casual where Victoria could meet her without pressure, where they could see if this fragile, beautiful thing they'd found could survive the reality of their very different lives. When Ryan dropped Victoria off at her building, the doorman's eyes widening at her arriving in a decade-old sedan rather than a town car, he walked her to the lobby entrance. Thank you, Victoria said, for the worst blind date that turned into the best evening I've had in years. Thank you for being stood up at the table next to mine, Ryan replied, grinning. And for being brave enough to let a random single dad crash your dinner. I think you might have saved my life tonight, Victoria said quietly, or at least reminded me that I have one. Ryan cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. I think we might have saved each other. He kissed her then, soft and tentative and full of promise, and Victoria felt something inside her that had been frozen for years finally begin to thaw. When they pulled apart, she was crying again, but this time from hope rather than loneliness. Saturday, she said. Saturday, Ryan confirmed. Fair warning, Emma's going to ask you a million questions and probably propose marriage on my behalf within the first 10 minutes. Victoria laughed. I can handle hostile negotiations with venture capitalists. I think I can manage one 7-year-old. Don't underestimate her, Ryan warned, eyes twinkling. She's scarier than any VC. As Victoria rode the elevator to her penthouse, she pulled out her phone and did something she hadn't done in years. She texted her assistant that she'd be taking Saturday off and blocking out more weekends going forward. Then she opened her calendar and started looking at what could be delegated, what meetings could be shortened, what parts of her empire building could make room for actual living. That night, in her expensive penthouse with its view of the city lights, Victoria knelt beside her bed and prayed for the first time since her mother's death. She didn't have eloquent words or specific requests. She just whispered thank you into the darkness, for blind dates that didn't show up, for strangers at adjacent tables, for second chances she hadn't known she needed, for divine appointments that looked nothing like what she'd expected but were exactly what her heart required. Saturday came wrapped in April sunshine and nervous anticipation. Victoria had changed outfits 4 times before settling on jeans and a simple sweater. Nothing that screamed CEO, everything that said she was trying to be approachable. She met them at a park near Ryan's modest suburban home, and her breath caught when she saw Emma for the first time. The little girl was a perfect blend of both parents, with her father's dark eyes and what must have been her mother's delicate features. Purple rain boots, just as advertised, and a t-shirt declaring her a future scientist. She spotted Victoria and turned to Ryan with a whisper that carried across the playground. Daddy, is that her? The lady from your date? Ryan crouched down to Emma's level, saying something Victoria couldn't hear, and then Emma was walking toward her with the fearless confidence of childhood. Hi, Emma said. I'm Emma Grace Mitchell. Are you Victoria? I am, Victoria said, crouching down too. It's wonderful to meet you, Emma. Did you know that butterflies taste with their feet? Emma asked immediately. And that plastic in the ocean is making turtles sick, and that Daddy's been smiling more since Wednesday, which my grandma says means you must be really special. Victoria felt tears threaten again and blinked them back. I did not know that about butterfly feet. That's amazing. And I care a lot about the ocean too. Maybe you can teach me more about helping the turtles? Emma's face lit up. Really? Because most grown-ups say they care, but then they use plastic straws anyway. Do you use plastic straws? Not anymore, Victoria said solemnly. You have my word. Emma studied her seriously, then nodded. Okay, you can stay. Daddy, she can stay. Ryan laughed, coming over to join them. I'm glad Emma approves. She's the real boss in our family. They spent the afternoon at the park, Emma dragging Victoria around to see her favorite spots and share her impressive knowledge of local flora and fauna. Victoria found herself genuinely engaged, asking questions, learning about Emma's world with its clear lines between right and wrong, its certainty that people could make a difference, its uncomplicated faith that good things could happen. When Emma ran off to play on the swings, Ryan sat beside Victoria on a bench, their shoulders touching. She likes you, he said. I like her, Victoria replied. She's extraordinary, Ryan. You've done an incredible job. We've had help, Ryan said. Sarah's mom is amazing with her. Our church community shows up when we need them. God provides, even when I'm angry at him for taking Sarah away. He turned to look at Victoria. I never thought I'd feel this way again. This hopeful. This open to possibilities. Neither did I, Victoria admitted. She watched Emma soar higher on the swings, laughing with pure joy. I've spent so long believing success meant doing everything alone, that needing people was weakness. But watching you with Emma, seeing how love makes you both stronger, not weaker, it's changing how I think about everything. Good, Ryan said. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. Because I'm falling for you, Victoria Chen. It's fast and probably crazy, but it's true, and life's too short to pretend otherwise. Victoria turned to him. This man who'd come into her life because they'd both been stood up, because they'd both been lonely enough to be honest, because sometimes God's plans involve adjacent restaurant tables and whispered observations. I'm falling for you too, she said, both of you, and it terrifies me because I don't know how to merge my world with yours, how to be a CEO and a potential partner, and maybe someday something to Emma. But I want to try. I want to figure it out. We'll figure it out together, Ryan promised, one day at a time, one dinosaur pancake at a time, one prayer at a time. Emma called for them to come push her on the swings, and they went together, this beginning of a family that had formed from loneliness and loss and unexpected grace. Victoria pushed Emma higher, listening to her delighted squeals, and thought about her mother's prayers in that small San Francisco church. Maybe this was what she'd prayed for all along. Not just opportunities and success, but the chance to be whole, to be loved, to love in return. As the afternoon sun painted everything gold, Victoria looked at Ryan over Emma's head, and he smiled at her with such warmth that she knew whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever adjustments they'd need to make, whatever merging of their different worlds would require, they would face it together. Because sometimes blind dates don't show up so that the right people can find each other. Sometimes God's timing looks like disappointment until you realize it was redirection. Sometimes the best love stories begin with loneliness whispered across adjacent tables, with two broken people brave enough to admit they don't have all the answers, with second chances disguised as first meetings. And sometimes, Victoria thought, as Emma demanded they all go for ice cream, and Ryan readily agreed, and they walked toward his car like a family already forming. Sometimes the greatest success isn't measured in dollars or deals or empires built, but in purple rain boots and butterfly facts, and a 7-year-old's wisdom about God's perfect timing. Sometimes being stood up is the best thing that ever happens to you.